Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Road to Freedom podcast. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Matt.
And today we're talking about the evils of the police state. Dun, dun, dun.
Those tyrants.
Yes. So we have kind of a news story to focus on around the topic we're going to be discussing. It comes from an MLive article entitled "Street Protester Choked by Officer Claims Excessive Force, False Arrest." And there's a video to it. It's the body cam footage of the officer. We'll link that into the show notes description on your various platforms, including the YouTube, so you can watch it there as well. Essentially, this topic of this episode is prefaced by "We are not lawyers. Don't listen to us. Figure out what the laws of your particular city, state, county, township, world, planetary body,
Round world.
Yeah,
Round
anywhere you might be, so that you're not falling into legal traps, and don't listen to us for anything other than
this is not
fun
advice
commentary
at all.
Yes,
not legal at least.
Right. So you have been warned there. So this street protester is protesting something. They never really say what he's protesting, even in the video. It's too bad. This would be a perfect platform, at least, to give the dude who is claiming excessive force, who's being choked by the front by a police officer, a chance to at least vent a little. Yeah. So essentially, the video shows this gentleman protesting, I think, a theater or a bank.
Well, he was in front. They didn't say what he was protesting, but he was protesting in front of a theater. And then the workers from the theater come out and complain to him, and he politely moves across the street in front of a PNC bank. Yeah, which I'm guessing might be closed this time. It's a weekend. I don't know. But
yeah, so it happens at like 5:00 p.m. and he's on public street or public sidewalk, and he doesn't have a bullhorn or anything. It's just looks like kind of a homeless person who is protesting whatever he wants to protest. Who knows?
He has that right. And
who cares?
And he was even nice enough when somebody came out and asked him, "Hey, could you just go elsewhere?" He crossed the street.
Yeah.
He wasn't being unreasonable.
Right. So it says here that he was being arrested after he refused to identify himself to an officer, is claiming excessive force, constitutional rights violation lawsuit. I do enjoy the fact that the summons hasn't been issued yet to the county because a filing fee hasn't been paid. But yet, anytime the state wants to file against anybody, there's no fee involved. It's just
it's when you want to file against the state.
Yeah. So if you want to sue people for choking you out and violating your constitutional rights, make sure to pay that $50 service fee.
And not just people, a peace officer.
Yeah, it was a very oxymoronic statement. Yeah. For that there. The interaction between the deputy and this person was captured on the deputy's body cam. This was released to MLive on November 27th of this year, the year of our Lord. And it says that he had complaints about him. We don't know who called or anything along those lines. The deputy approaches him, talks to him for a little bit, asks him to identify himself. The gentleman refuses. The deputy then tells him that Michigan law requires him to identify himself upon demand of a peace officer. He again refuses. The deputy responds, "Then you go to jail." Eventually, the deputy, I'm reading from the article here, told the person he was being disorderly now, and soon after told him that he was being arrested to failure to identify. So, got him for disorderly conduct, failure to identify, and then, of course, he's got marijuana on him, which this was before the legal aspect of it in Michigan. The gentleman begins yelling, "This guy has a gun, he's trying to steal my property," which that's a perfect description of the state. They have the guns, and they're trying to steal our property. So, yes, from his lips to God's ears, we're hearing that. Then the deputy then kicks his right leg and causes him to fall to the ground.
Well, he chokes him first. Front chokes him
with
his hand. With the officer's right hand choking the guy's. neck for at least a couple seconds. Then that's when he had him up against the wall, he kicks his leg out from underneath.
Yeah, and the dude's pretty passive. He's got his arms crossed. He's not resisting in any way, or making overtures towards the officer, and then they ended up getting him arrested, and they ended up having to take him to a hospital because he had broken his leg.
Yeah, broken tibia.
Yeah.
I can only guesstimate here. They don't say actually how, but somebody did kick him in the leg.
Kick him, yeah. There might be an ABC causation right there. Plus, the cop doesn't look to be like he's going to fall on you gently.
No. He's a big boy too.
The man says that the police are supposed to protect citizens, not arrest them, and use violent and excessive force for exercising basic constitutional rights. I don't know where he's been the last 80 years, but that's pretty much what the state does for the most part in certain situations. So, here's where we enter our, but there are a few bad apples and few instances where the liberal media pulls from, but at the same time, too, we have to realize that the us versus them mentality is clearly established just by the way police are trained and conduct themselves and hold themselves accountable, and we see that because this is kind of a stepping off point for this episode, but we've been watching police videos about self-identifying yourselves to people, or where you can film in public, or how to watch police do their job, and it seems like I've been watching these things for like 5 years now, has to be, and it just seems like no police department has their stuff in line, or at least it continues to happen so much that there are entire subreddits dedicated to it.
There's, no matter what department you go to, there's at least of these videos, there's at least a few people that don't realize what the actual law is when people come to film or do things like that. Their sergeant finally comes out and is like, okay, yeah, you're fine. You're doing your legal thing. Just don't come on our property, which is fine. But it's like you'd think at a certain point, and cops know these videos. They've even said it on there. So you think at a certain point that would be implemented in their training as well. Like, hey guys, how about you don't, interfere with people's constitutional rights? That'd be kind of cool. Mm-hmm. Some of the most basic rights we have. But
yeah, so this guy's protesting, not using amplification.
Yeah, and I read it says he's protesting and picketing anti-government sentiment. So right there, he's already protesting the government. I don't know in what capacity.
Yeah.
But so then you have a government official coming up to you, demanding you stop.
Right.
And illegally he's telling him that he must ID himself when he wasn't committing a crime, so he doesn't have to.
So there are many things wrong here, and it goes to show you too that just the abundance of police departments that are choosing to go to body cams does not make anybody safer or anything like that. It gives us better videos, I guess, to respond to. But here you have a police officer who doesn't seem to know the law or doesn't care, and is really not going to be held accountable because of a little thing called qualifiable immunity, which pretty much means if the officer has just some vague understanding of it being possible that a law could exist and tries to enforce that, then he's not held accountable for violating someone's rights. So in order to prove that a police officer is just explicitly violating law or arresting somebody unlawfully, you have to prove this knowledge that he or she knows that what he or she is doing is wrong and illegal and not backed by any legal precedent, which is hard. It's kind of like proving slander or libel. You have to prove that the person knows what they're saying is not true, and it's pretty much like this, except the state can claim to you ignorance of the law is no excuse, but for them it's, we thought that there was some law somewhere that gives me the ability to demand ID. There are certain states that have what are called stop and ID states. However, even there, you still have a reasonable suspicion that has to happen. A police officer has to assume that you're going to commit a crime, had committed a crime, or about to commit a crime, and
which can still be pretty vague.
Yeah, and it seems like the videos we watch where it's like, oh, you're being suspicious because you have a camera and you're taking public photography. Therefore, I do have reasonable suspicion because you're being suspicious. No. It's suspicion of what? Suspicion of a crime.
And then people say that, and every single police officer, well, not every single, but most police officers at that point say, well, ever since 9/11.
Yeah, or in this day and age.
This day and age is one they say all the time.
Something happened in Dallas, Texas, where police officers were executed, and now Podunk, Arkansas, has to assume that every person with a DSLR camera is a terrorist in waiting.
Yeah, or every person, even with their just cell phone camera, is obviously, scoping out this, post office or this police station because they're going to have a terror attack against it. It's like, that just goes to show you what kind of a police state that their mindset is in.
Mm-hmm.
If they think anybody with a camera, not filming somebody else, or just filming a building is obviously a terrorist. Where it's like, if terrorists are smart, you got Google Images these days.
Yeah, Google Images.
Google's doing the job for you.
Or do it in the middle of the night.
Or not Google Images, Google Maps.
Yeah, not when you're out in broad
there,
daylight.
Like,
and
that's just me spitballing.
and you're recruiting pretty much pretty much white guys for the most part. There are a few of the ones that we've seen. Some of the more annoying ones tend not to be the white guys, but there is one who's definitely a white guy who's super annoying that we watch. Yeah. But that's neither here nor there. You can be annoying. You can be, well within your right and still be annoying. And that's what people don't understand is they have some vague understanding of, well, if I don't want my photo to be taken, then I can just say no, and that's not the case. So you can't trespass. You have no reasonable expectation of privacy in public, and the one that we always hear is you can't trespass the eye.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at somebody through a chain link fence into a military base that has monuments up for fallen soldiers or commemorations, then they say, oh, you can't film here. But it's like, well, yeah, if you don't want it to be seen, build a wall that you can't see through.
Yeah. Or a fence that you can't see through,
Yeah.
Something. That's what's the biggest one with these people. And I always laugh at these ones where everyone's like, well, I didn't give you permission to film me. Like, you're in a public area. Yeah. Like you said, they have no expectation of privacy. Like, if you don't want to be potentially filmed, stay in your house.
Well, and, it's always funny, too, when cops say that because they're the ones that have body cams and cameras in their car.
And have to identify themselves.
Yeah, usually by policy.
Yeah, so... Oh, I don't want to be filmed. And then the people start doing the film for film. You're filming me, I'll film you. But wait, weren't you just saying that you can't film here, but now you're filming me filming here? Yeah. That's kind of contradictory right there.
So you're a terrorist, too, or in this day and age. So, yeah, some of those YouTube videos are funny. Not so much the sovereign citizen ones, which are annoying and potentially dangerous. So we're not talking about those type of people. We're just talking about people who engage in everyday legal activities and police coming over and harassing them, like this guy in this article who's just protesting whatever he wants to protest. And they got him for this, public noise violation or
disorderly conduct, resisting and obstructing and possession of marijuana. But right after that, you read, but the charges were dismissed 3 days later. And the fact that you see that not only this disorderly conduct, resisting, and possession of marijuana was just dropped 3 days later, obviously, just goes to show that the cop must have done something wrong. Because if you're throwing all three of those out later, and then a lawsuit follows that, you got to realize that you were in the wrong at that point.
Right. Well, and it's sad too because you sue the department, it's gonna you're less likely to sue the person civilly because it's in the carrying out of his duties. And so who do you get the payout from? Well, it's from the city, which are funded by the taxpayers. So there's nothing that the police department ever takes a hit on personally. There's no rating of the pension fund or even pop can bottles getting turned in or what have you. There's nothing that deters them from doing stuff like this again. The person, the officer could be out days or, paid vacations usually is what it is. You've been reprimanded and it's in your file, but...
or even if it's unpaid, leave. He's coming back to a job eventually.
Yeah, well, and even if he's fired for this, which doubt it, you always have the union backing you.
More serious than this, and
way more serious. Yeah, way more serious. But because police have unions in place, it's really hard to fire people in unions, and it's really hard to fire bad police officers, just like it's really hard to fire bad teachers. So we are having the same type of issues with the police that we are having with teachers. And unfortunately, we're too busy talking about who can kneel at football games. What thousand or millionaire can kneel at football games rather than actual realistic police reform, if any. When we're talking about prison reform, or at least starting to, maybe we can slip in police reform there, as in maybe qualified immunity should be off the table a little bit more. It should be a little bit more strict. If you can have a world's mass murderer, if you break into his house without a warrant and all that evidence can be thrown out, maybe, just maybe, we can be a little bit more strict on forcing police officers to know the law. And if they fail to know so many of these laws, maybe that tells us something about how many laws that we write.
Yeah, maybe we have way too many laws.
Clearly the case. Because unless if you're pulling out the little flip book, it always seems like, for the most part, police officers are just getting people on the same type of thing. And once marijuana goes bye-bye, it'll be interesting to see what the new thing is.
It'd be interesting
impaired driving or something like that.
It'd be interesting to see like just a massive document of like the most highly reoccurring laws, and then how many laws that we are still in places in states and everything like that just haven't been. Nobody's been arrested or cited for anything for them for ages, and it's like, you should look at that and be like, whoa, wow, nobody has gotten arrested for cussing in public in front of a woman or child for 85 years. Yeah. Maybe we should get rid of that law.
Or there's ordinances within the city of Kalamazoo that says you can't practice witchcraft or divination. It's like, do we really need that? Yeah. That on the? Are we still against that?
Wiccan is considered religion, right?
I mean, is Wiccan and witchcraft the same thing? I don't know what the legal definition in the city ordinances is, but it's even like we have a working relationship where sometimes we have to refer to a single ordinance, and we've had to underline it and put it in red and put it in their face and say, please enforce this ordinance as an owner of private property, where you don't allow me to enforce what is my own property rights. I have to call you and you have to do it, and they won't do it unless if you fill out their paperwork and their check boxes that makes you completely indemnified to anything that happens, and it's written in such a way that it causes you to be legally liable for anything that happens to that person that you're wanting to kick out of your property in any part of the city with that particular agency. It's like, it's crazy that even the laws that are in place, they have other ways to get around that. So you are taking more liability, even though you should have the ability to control your own property. But no, they're the ones that have to come in and do it.
If anyone takes liability for that, like, hey, I want this person off my property, guess what? You took them off my property. Now they're your problem.
Yeah.
Like, hey, shout out to, Kalamazoo City Ordinance 22-7, by the
way. We know that quite well. So if you're in the city of Kalamazoo and you want to trespass somebody from your property, there's nothing that you have to fill out. It's already part of your property. There's no need to call the police to kick somebody out. You can just do it.
Yeah.
And if they return, then it's trespassing. Then you need a police report.
Yeah.
There's
don't
no
allow the cops to tell you that you need to fill out a form, and the cops personally need to give it to this person, because then you got to worry about were they able to find, like, no, I told the person, hey, I don't want you on my property, get off my property. Boom, that's you've just banned them from your property.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about it anymore. Next time they return, you can call the police then, and that is a trespassing case.
Here's a secret we've learned for how this podcast is about how to help libertarian thought from a local area of effect. Write stuff down. Even if it's in a small little notebook on a sheet of paper that you hang up on the fridge. Say, I kicked out Uncle Bill on this and this time on this date and told him not to return. And if you did, the police would be called and you would be arrested for trespassing.
Yeah, if your phone's handy,
Yeah.
if it's not too
Take a
chaotic
photo.
of a thing when you are kicking, Uncle Jerry out during Thanksgiving, then take a little video of it. So you've got video proof of you actually saying, "Hey, Uncle Jerry, you're no longer welcome at property because we're tired of you getting drunk and trying to fight a turkey."
Yeah. Even if it's after the fact and you're documenting it, it's better to have something than nothing, because there's going to be people who have nothing.
Yeah, some sort of documentation.
Yeah.
Like you said, just a written down piece of paper that said, this is the date and time I banned this person from my property.
And then the police are going to come the second time. They're going to say, well, we weren't there. We didn't physically see it with our eyes. Well, here I have something that says, and I'm willing to testify in court that I initially banned this person on the date in question for this video, and I've got something to prove because I did a recollection of this on this video on that day immediately after it happened. So you have something. It's whether or not you're willing to testify in court against it, and that's all that they need. But then they pile up, oh, well, you didn't fill out this crazy sheet that we're going to make you, we're going to try and tell you.
Never indemnify yourself either.
Yeah,
and also, if the cops come back and say that kind of thing, you go on your computer, you write in Kalamazoo City Ordinance 22-7, you print it off, and you give that to them at that point.
Now they can refuse to.
You say, here, take this to your sergeant.
Yeah.
He's going to know what to do.
Yeah, sadly, it's going to be the sergeants that make those determinations.
We dealt with a pretty good sergeant the other day. There was a female.
Yeah. So here's the thing about your interactions with police, no matter who you are, even if you're the victim. It's an adversarial relationship. The police can always lie to you. They always have the ability to arrest you for whatever you say. So you're a drug dealer. You're calling about someone stealing your supply who's also a drug dealer. They now have your statement that you've admitted to being a drug dealer. They're going to arrest you. So whether or not you're in the right about your property being stolen, they always have the ability to arrest you. So just remember that it's literally part of the police job and part of their mandate to not be your friend. There are good things that we can use them for. There's always the good people, but at the same time, this story exemplifies that even if you're protesting in just your normal voice, you can be choked, thrown to the ground, leg broken, arrested, and then having the charges dismissed with nothing else, and you have to come back and pay whatever the filing fee cost is to sue the city, which then doesn't really do anything other than gives you as a single person a payout, but doesn't really change the culture or anything like that.
Yeah, and because in the whole thing with talking to police, think of how many things you've said in your life, like in the heat of moment, whether it's in an argument or just you're mad or something like that, and you said something in the heat of the moment and that you said is dumb or you didn't mean and something like that. So that comes when you have every right to just not talk to the police if you don't want to, because lawyers might be expensive, but you still can just sit there in silence. You don't even have to say lawyer. You can just literally not talk to the police.
Which is what this guy should have done. He was not being detained at this point. Detention is a legal standing in which they don't even have to have you in handcuffs. They're just detaining you to find out if you're committing a crime, have committed a crime, or about to commit a crime. They can detain you up to a certain amount. or if you're committed a felony in their presence, or if they're arresting you, what have you, you're in detention. So just if you're going to ask a question from them, am I being detained? That's what this guy should have done. He should have never talked to the police because he wasn't detained. The officer was coming over to, if he was going to do something, he needed the guy to tell him something, because it doesn't seem like he was protesting at the time. We don't know what's before the body cam footage, but that guy should never have talked to the police. And it's human nature. It's human nature to want to explain yourself, especially if you've been a victim of a crime, or you got in a fight with somebody. You're always wanting to give your side of the story, to get it out there first. But that is the exact opposite of what you should do. You should never talk to the police, ever. During an accident, if you're pulled over for speeding, I mean, you could maybe get out of a ticket if you confess and say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speed, it was only 5 over. What you've done is admitted that you did speed, that you were 5 over, and he's probably still going to write you a ticket for 1 over so that you don't get any points, but you pay the amount, and so he doesn't have to go to court, but he still gets his nick on his scorecard. For
there's a reason why they walk up to you and say, hey, I pulled you over. I've been guilty of that, where I pulled you over. I was speeding. Yeah.
And I mean, you could get a warning always, but it's always best not to talk to the police, because there's no reading of your Miranda right that all of a sudden, then they can start recording to see what you say. The only time they ever have to read you your Miranda rights is if they're interviewing you after you've been arrested. So every time you've seen a police drama on TV where they're immediately arresting the person and Mirandizing them, they never have to do that at all. They only have to do that if they're going to interrogate you after you've been arrested. And there are certain things too, like you have to, once you are arrested, then you do have to identify yourself. If you don't have a government ID on you, which there's nothing that says that you have to carry government ID unless if you're driving, at least in the state of Michigan, I should say. This is always, again, not lawyers. You should know your law, blah, blah, blah. You have to identify yourself, give your name, date of birth. I think you have to give your address. The one thing about that I'm sure someone could challenge, but later on is, well, if I'm being arrested for minor in possession of alcohol, MIP, given my birth date gives you the understanding of what my age is. So am I confessing to a crime? Or it is illegal for you to not report if you run over somebody in your car. So you have to call the police and say, hey, I've just run over somebody. Please be at this and this, intersection. Yeah. So it makes you confess to that as well. But those are two other extremes that they can fight it out in court on that. But for the most part, don't talk to the police. You never have to talk to the police. If you're being detained by the police and they're not arresting you, there's nothing that you should say or have to say. If they are arresting you, that's when you're being forced to talk. After that, you have to tell the police that you are refusing to answer questions and refusing to waive your right to remain silent. The Supreme Court has ruled that you physically have to say, I'm not waiving my right to remain silent in order for you to invoke it.
If you don't say that, your silence will just be taken as
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, well, and it can still be used against you. Your silence can be used against you.
Like, he remained silent.
Yeah.
Well, if you say, hey, I invoke my Fifth Amendment right.
Right. So, the reason we wanted to go over this was to kind of say, we have this idea, especially from the Midwest and small town America, that the police there are your friends. And, we have friends and family members who are or have been police officers. And, I'm sure those are great people that have never done anything wrong in their entire life. But the one thing that I think most of them would say is, if I was in trouble with the police, the very first thing I would do is not say anything. There's no getting out of it. There's no talking it out. If you're arrested, contact the police or contact your lawyer. It's the same thing if you are in a legal shooting. You want to say, oh, he was coming at me. He broke in my house. Here it was. Nope. All you need to do is call the police, say that a shooting or someone's been involved in a shooting, and then don't touch the gun. You contact a lawyer once. You just don't talk to the police, and that you want to.
Yeah,
you really do.
You think about it. The police are the ones. They're just. I mean, they're just trying to do their job for the most part. Too.
Right.
They're trying to find out what happened and do all that stuff. So you feel like you want to help them out, but I mean, you call a lawyer because why not? If you even if it's a self-defense case where it's shut and open and shut case of you acted in self-defense to protect yourself or your family, like why not still just stay silent and talk to somebody who is an expert in law, aka a lawyer? Like,
right.
Why wouldn't you in that kind of case where some little thing could be skewed and it could be a totally different story, and now you said something in the heat of the moment, you might have accidentally uttered because the guy was coming after your family, like, oh good, I'm glad he's dead, and boom,
right.
Now that can be used against you.
Yeah.
And so that's why they say it's best to just stay quiet.
Yeah, because you might have the DA who is going against you that wants to stop guns from being legal in your town, and this is a perfect opportunity to be a bad prosecutor. That's entirely possible, and it's literally you against the state in that situation.
Hence why it's always called the state versus when the state wasn't even the offended party. That's all I gotta say. Like, if it's me against this guy, why does it all of a sudden become the state versus that guy?
Because society at whole was harmed and not you. So, the whole let's put him in a cage really doesn't do anything to help you. Oh well, he raped and murdered my sister. Therefore, the state needs his body for 60 years, and then everything's right. Justice has been served. I don't know what justice is in that case, but that's entirely a different topic.
And one thing that I was thinking about when it goes to like the mentality of the cops, like the us versus them mentality, a lot of them have. Like I understand that mentality because military kind of has that mentality, especially in a time of war. You go over there because it does boil down to like us versus them, but
sure.
But when like you're overseas, especially in a place like Afghanistan, you didn't have a uniformed person, so it was us versus them, but it wasn't like you were rude and like calling out every single person you see, because not every single person you see is going to be that terrorist or whatever. So I mean, it should be you live in a hyper alertness state, but you're not necessarily bashing everyone you see, kicking in every single door, just questioning any person that's out on the street like, hey, are you a terrorist? It's because 80% of the people you're going to be walking by aren't. They're going to be the regular everyday people. So it's like when it comes to cops, it should be a totally different mentality though. Like, yes, they should keep their vigilance and their hyper alertness, but yeah, you should keep they should keep their vigilance and their alertness. Cops always should do that, because complacency kills and everything. But you also got to remember you're there serving the people. You're not in a military thing. You're not in a time of war over in an area where you're an active combatant. Like you're a peace officer. That's what you're supposed to be. You're there for the community, and you've got to stay alert, but also serve the community. You're not everybody you walk by is going to be that gangster that wants to kill you. Not everybody's a tweaker. Not everybody's got drugs on.
And that's where most of it comes down to, is the drug war is the one that causes this heightened alert, because everyone could be a potential Pablo Escobar.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're going up against somebody who robbed a bank or is a murderer or is a mobster. Okay, yep, I can understand resorting to violence a little bit more there in that capacity. But like this guy, it's just contempt of cop. It's you didn't tell me in a good enough time, and I'm ignorant of the law, and I have a badge, and that makes me immune. Literally,
I had a rough day. I'm annoyed with dealing with you, so I'm gonna flex my muscle on you, and it's like that's not how it is. Like, again, it comes back to like serve and protect. I mean, you're really actually supposed to be serving the community, protecting the community, not because the cops like that are becoming the nuisance of the community. You know, and that's a big I really think a lot of it. I mean, it boils down to their training. You know, maybe the training needs to be a little better. Maybe that I've never been through police academy or anything like that, so I don't know. But maybe some of the training they go through is just too, military mindset of where, they're the enemy. We got to get them. Everyone's out to get us. When it's not, it's a tough job. Don't get me wrong. Being a cop's a tough job, and you are in very dangerous situations where that person you never suspected is the guy with the gun and you're in danger now. But that's where you keep your alertness and you still, handle situations the proper way. We're not in a police state where you can just come up and demand things and do whatever you want. There's still laws and you're still held to a high standard of the law. People need to realize that. Police officers need to be held to an even higher standard of law than the laws they're enforcing on everybody else.
Yeah, well, and that's not the case because qualifiable immunity just makes it. Yeah, I have a vague understanding that a public nuisance is anyone who shouts, down with the government, and now I can demand everything from them and move them along, because a protest is only a protest if you're speaking at a reasonable level, and there's 16 people behind you all in suits that are upstanding members of the community. So
and another thing of hold them to a higher standard thing. It's a perfect example is I'm driving through downtown the other day on Kalamazoo Ave where it's 30 miles an hour through downtown, and a cop, no lights, no anything on, because legally if they don't have their lights on and they're on when they're going to a call, they still have to go the speed limit, rolling through town going at least 40. Okay, well then in that case I should be able to match speed with a cop, right? Because he doesn't have his lights and sirens on. He's not on his way to an emergency call. So if he's going to go that speed limit, maybe the speed limit's changed. I don't know.
Well, who's gonna pull him over? That's the thing.
Yeah, I should be able to pull him over at that point.
And this whole thing with the thin blue line and everything along those lines, like the American flag with the blue line, I just do not understand that. To me, whenever watching Serpico and all these movies where it's it's the thin blue line, it's always the thin blue line of silence. It's always the cops never read out cops, and that's still a thing. You have NYPD officers and LAPD officers who are getting fired and demoted and kicked out because they're going against and turning people in for saying, oh, there's such a thing as bosses that are making you have so many arrests or so many stop and frisks, and they're secretly recording these commands to go out and find things. It's whatever happened to police officers wanting to do their job so well that they regulate themselves out of a job. Yeah. That's not the case. It's always oh, we've done a good job if we've thrown people in jail.
Well, and
it's maybe we should take a look and understand that maybe it's not about that, and that's where private policing would come in and say the model might not be the best, and we've had that same model in place for years, and it's only now swinging back from in the 60s we had SWAT and things got more militarized, and you had more of a police state action, especially with things like Kent State and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then in the 80s you had the war on drugs really come to a forefront, and you needed more and more machinery. And then under the Clinton administration, then you had community policing. That's when you had cops planting flowers or going to schools and stuff like that. You had the DARE program. But now that money's dried up, and so those cops that are in schools now are arresting kids in schools for minor things because the teacher doesn't want to deal with their crap, and so you were yelling, disturbing the peace of the classroom. So now you have a misdemeanor on you, or you got into a fight in school, and so instead of getting expelled or suspended, oh no, now you have a felony record on you because. You broke a potted plant.
One thing I gotta say about the thin blue line flags, technically, wouldn't it be defacing a flag, the American flag, by changing the colors and putting a different colored line? That's why only flag I'll ever fly is the Stars and Stripes.
the old one, the 1776 one.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. 13 colonies are nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm moving to one of the colonies.
So, yes, your uncle, your friend who's the police officer, that's not the person we're talking about, but at the same time, they're part of a group that has different rights than everybody else. They have the ability to arrest people and to lock them in a cage, and sadly, there's no accountability for them other than maybe, hopefully, there's so much of an outcry that something has to be done, and that person gets fired, but then they can always go to a different police department, maybe with even in the county organization, and get it back. Like, yes, you may have somebody go to jail, but those are way few and far between, and especially it's got to be something big, like a police officer rapes 22 women in his vehicle, and it's caught on camera finally. It's never like this where a guy was assaulted. Like he was doing perfectly legal things. He didn't fight the cop.
No.
The cop choked him, threw him on the ground, broke his leg. Anybody else, and they would be the one arrested.
Yeah, if I would have done that to a guy, I would have been arrested easily, and I'd be sitting in jail.
But then again, we've seen people get into altercations with other people, start the fights, kick people on the ground, and they just get told, "Well, that person might be filing charges, so be prepared."
Yeah. Well, and like that's what I think this whole thing boils down to. There's obviously something in the training that needs to be changed, and maybe, like we've mentioned before, maybe something that needs to be changed is maybe we need to start testing out privatized things for police.
Yeah,
try a different system,
or you just have different models of policing, because it seems like what it is you just kind of have the same modes of policing occurring. You don't have citizen groups that have it, or like, what if people on the right didn't have so much like tough on crime, and the right didn't have so much like you can do whatever you want, and as long as it's not misgendering somebody, then like maybe there's a meet in the middle where we can like elect a sheriff who isn't a police officer that can say, okay, here's something that looks to be wrong from my perspective. Let's completely change it. And maybe that's what we should be doing. It's like electing a farmer as Supreme Court justice. I want to see a farmer or some, factory worker who just has the basic education become a judge.
Yeah, if you guys would like to see me run for sheriff next, leave some comments. Leave some support.
Kalamazoo County, Matt Martin.
I'll run if that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
I'll start there.
Yeah, yep. That's all we need. Vote for yourself in those. So we kind of wanted to cover policing, and to just tell you, listen, we're not saying all cops are corrupt, but don't talk to the police. Just don't do yourself a favor and don't talk to the police ever.
And watch out when they give you the good cop, bad cop. I had that happen to me one time.
Yeah,
when they were trying to pin this stupid thing on me, and good cop, bad cop is just obvious too. One of them comes up and
now it is.
Yeah, it's so obvious. I even saw it back then when I was 20 years old. One of them was just like, "Hey, we know you did it. You better fess up." Blah blah blah. And then the good cop, comes in, puts his shoulder around you. "Hey, bud, come here. We're just trying to," and it's just a tactic. It's a tactic they were trying to use. One scares you, one gets you on his side. "Oh, my buddy's kind of being rude. I know. I'm sorry, but just tell me. Tell me, old Papa Bear over here."
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, first of all, I see through that, and that's another reason not to talk to the cops, because they're taught tactics to coerce you into.
The police can lie to you.
Yeah, the police can sit there, lie to your face, but yet you lie to the cops, and then you're the worst person ever.
There's nothing good, especially traffic is one thing. You make your choices on that, but if it's anything, like we've witnessed people who have gotten in fights with other people, or who are having a consensual conversation where they think they're being required to talk to the police. No, just don't talk to the police ever. If you're being arrested, there are certain details that you have to give, but no statements to the facts of anything. Hey, were you in that bank that got robbed? You don't have to, even if you're the bystander, even if you're the person that got taken hostage, it's best not to talk to the police at all in those situations.
Yeah, like consult. I mean, most things in your life, you try to consult with a professional.
Yeah.
Before you do it,
Yeah.
you know something. You know your pipes aren't working right. You call a plumber. He's a professional. You're doing that. You call a professional. So you're in trouble with the law potentially, or if you got some sort of legal issues, call a professional before you talk to the cops.
Yeah. Before you find out you have cancer, you consult WebMD, and it's always yes.
WebMD is always right.
So
Self-diagnosis.
You're never going to help yourself out of a situation. You're only going to help yourself into the situation, and that's what the police are trained to do. They have different tactics: asking open-ended questions, asking confrontational questions, having a layer of suspicion towards you that you want to then give your side of the story. There's no reason to talk to them. If they're going to arrest you, you might beat the rap, but you won't beat the ride. Mentality is still there, and it's way better to sit in jail for a weekend or however long than it is to have charges laid against you. And unfortunately, hey, a jury of your peers, that's great, but how many people do you know where it's like, well, the police officer said this, I'm sure he wouldn't lie, is the mentality. Those are the jury of your peers. So good luck trying to find people that don't do that. If you have me on your jury, then I will try and hear both sides, and then if jury nullification is necessary, I will try that.
Yeah, because if you have us on your jury, we're going to sit there and be the people that are like, okay, well, state, now you have to prove this person did it.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones who have the burden of proof.
Yeah. So that's kind of what we wanted to jump off on. Consult a lawyer.
Another good thing, if you do want to talk to him, could be pull the Ron Swanson, answer questions with questions.
Yeah. I don't think any of us are smart enough to do that.
No,
in the heat of a moment,
so bad.
Yeah.
Like I would have so many pauses where it'd be like, "Well, where were you on the night of the 25th?"
Yeah.
Where were you? Like that would be my comeback. Just repeat the question.
Then the report is he was elusive and appeared to be deranged and on something.
Yeah. Then I'm facing like he can't stand trial because he's insane.
So again. Out of a vehicle is different than in a vehicle. There are certain requirements that you have, especially in Michigan, where you have to submit to field sobriety tests, and if you refuse them,
a license, you agree
to it, and it's only nullified if it's an illegal stop. But then you have to prove that it's an illegal stop, and get the district attorney or someone to verify that it was an illegal stop. But good luck with that. So there are many caveats to this. Do your own research, but at the very least, don't talk to the police.
As Eddie Bravo says, just look into it.
Yeah, just look into it. Yes, and the earth is flat, I guess. So the link to the story will be in the show notes below, and that's kind of what we wanted to talk about this time. Was fortunately, don't talk to the police, but at the same time, fortunately, we don't have to talk to the police. That was what the whole revolution was for. We didn't need to let the redcoats into our domicile to check our papers to see if it had the stamp of the king on there. And guess what? Unless they have a warrant, we still don't need to do that. So
you have the right to talk to them if you want. We wouldn't.
Yeah, we'd definitely.
That's the beauty of America. You have the right to cooperate with the police and talk to them if you want. But you also have the right to just sit there and be silent and say nothing. With how mad they're going to get at you, you just say, no, I don't want to talk to you.
Or nothing at all. Because even in a court of law, you don't have to say anything.
You just sit there and stare.
Yeah. Well, Ed, if you want to get choked and your tibia broken, America's a great place to do it, I guess.
Yeah, you can sue for anything, so you can definitely sue for that.
Yeah. Although healthcare might be a hard thing to get by, so. Yeah. Because it's overregulated by the government, of course. Yeah. Okay. So that's what we wanted to cover this time, and hopefully that helps. And in our rambling, a libertarian, of course, would approve private police and have.
I say we try it.
Well, why not? We have 50 states. Why don't we try it in half of Rhode Island.
In a city, yeah.
Let's do it in Rhode Island. Small little Rhode Island.
You know, maybe we'll start a GoFundMe campaign, and we'll try to start it here in Kalamazoo.
Well, you know, here's the thing.
Matt
Real
and
quick
Patrick's
before we sign off, there's already private police. It's security.
Yeah.
It's just there are certain things that security can't do because the law doesn't allow them to. However, there are things like
we can go into a contract with the the city that you want to man, and they give you the rights to do that.
It's the city or the neighborhood or the building or
the sheriff to deputize you.
Whatever. The contract and private property allows these things to happen. If this city didn't want this guy standing on the street corner, don't have a public sidewalk, because that's what you have when you have a public facility.
By having a public facility, public sidewalks, and all that, you're inviting the public to be on them.
Yeah.
And they have a legal right to be.
Yep.
No matter if they're protesting the government that gives them that right. That is the beauty of America. He has the right to do that, but his rights were infringed upon, and his tibia was broken.
Yep. And he'll have no recourse other than to take money stolen by the taxpayers as a form of payment.
That would be the beauty of a privatized police force, too, because you would have a finger to point at right there, and it would come out of their pockets, so they would be the ones hurt. So, in theory, they would then try to train their officers better and police the area better, because they don't want to have huge $1 million payouts because one of their officers decided to go a little rogue and was pissed off easily that day.
It incentivizes them to act in a more moral behavior, because there would be an easier ability to fire them or hold them accountable by shareholders or the insurance company or what have you. Here it's just, the insurance paid out this amount and the city's on the hook for this amount. So
you're just, you won the lawsuit. If he wins the lawsuit, good for him, but it's just moving our tax, Manastee's tax money into him. It's like, he's getting stolen money.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
There's better ways to do it.
Yeah. There are things to try.
More than one way to skin a cat.
Yes. Which I think may be illegal in the city of Manatee.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us on episode number 16 of the Road to Freedom podcast. And always live radically and live free.
And privatize it.